title slide, but I'll just kick things off, I think. Um, so thank you all for joining a midsummer presentation, and I think this is a good topic for midsummer as in the gift planning world, we start to think about year end. We're into Q3 now, past the Memorial Day, July 4th holiday, and thinking about kind of what big gifts might be on the horizon as we look at year end and the giving season. So, white whale sightings, true tales of the search for mega gifts. Ryan Raffin, managing partner with Charitable Solutions. I'm joined by Paul Casperson, vice president. Um, and I don't know that we've ever done one of these together, you and I, Paul. So this will be fun. I'm glad that Paul was able to join because he worked on a number of these gifts this year, and we've got more case studies than we originally even promoted in the email blast. So thank you all for joining. Quick housekeeping item. We will not make these slides available, but what we will do is send out a recording of the best webinar between today's session and Thursday's session. We'll also include all of the questions that are asked with answers from today's session and Thursday's session. We do ask that you drop any questions in the Q&A rather than the chat feature. It's just a little bit easier for us to manage via the Q&A. And I think I saw that Russ Willis on our team, among other team members, has joined. Russ worked on, I think, all of the case studies as well. So if there are any technical questions, Russ may be able to assist with those. So with that said, I'll just jump in here. Anyone who's attended our webinars before knows we always start these with a bit of an overview of who Charitable Solutions is, what we do. These are free webinars, so we say, bear with us while we go through our normal propaganda, starting kind of in the top right, and I'll go somewhat clockwise, I suppose. Emergency Assistance Administration, disaster relief funds, basically similar to the Charitable Solutions model of outsourced gift planning and risk management. This is outsourcing employee assistance programs, particularly via the Emergency Assistance Foundation, which administers an unbelievable number of disaster relief funds. I can never believe that number when I see it. When I first started working with Brian, I was working a lot on the EAF side, and there were maybe a dozen funds. 420 is a crazy amount of growth, serving now millions of employees with hundreds of millions of grants. So that is a program that is a little different from the rest of what we do, but has grown quite a bit over the years. Education and training, including continuing education talks, stuff a lot like this that I think nearly all of our team does. Paul in particular does a lot. Brian, of course, does a lot all over the country. I do some as well. I will be doing some in person in a few weeks at the Colorado Planned Giving Roundtable. We also have Paul's excellent planned giving AI tools, the Gift Planners Workstation, which Paul and I have been chatting about a little bit as recently as like an hour ago, and the AI tools, Frank and Max, which are very effective and widely beloved by everyone who uses them regularly. I think that's safe to say from the feedback I've heard. Paul, if you think otherwise, let me know, but I don't think you do. Charitable gift annuity risk management, primarily doing outside consulting with charities who run their own gift annuity pools and assessing the overall health of those pools and risk analysis, particularly if there are larger gift annuities within that pool that might tip things into a riskier profile. So doing both the risk analysis and also reinsurance on the gift annuities and I think gift annuity pools overall. Charitable appraisals, the tagline there is, if you can give it to charity, we can appraise it. That includes appraisals for just about every kind of non-cash asset which might need a qualified appraisal for income tax purposes, including business interests, cryptocurrency, life insurance, certainly, as you might expect from the gift annuity work, but also things like precious metals and collectibles. Moving over to the National Gift Annuity Foundation, that is our independent gift annuity pool, licensed to issue gift annuities in all 50 states. So it has not just hundreds of contracts and over 100 million in assets. It is a comprehensive gift annuity solution, both for charities that might get approached about gift annuity in a state that they're not licensed in, or perhaps a gift annuity to be funded with an asset that they may not be able to handle themselves, like real estate. Certainly, that's something that Paul and I work on quite a bit, as do other members of our team. So the National Gift Annuity Foundation has certainly seen a lot of growth over the last few years as well. And then finally, non-cash asset risk management, which is primarily what we'll be talking about today, primarily what I work on, Paul quite a bit as well. That includes some charitable consulting work where charities will hire charitable solutions on an hourly basis, typically to evaluate proposed non-cash donations. But the larger part of that work is working through Decamai Foundation, Inc., our national donor advised fund platform dedicated to complex assets. Close to 7 billion in total gifts completed over Decamai's lifespan since 2003. And on the next slide, I think we are the first webinar to have the audited 2025 numbers. Previous webinars this year have used our unaudited numbers, but now we have those. So this ties in actually a little bit to the subject of today's presentation, the white whale gifts, where we see close to 700 donations in 2025 at nearly a $2 billion value. And you can see with all these different asset types, a rather large average. The cryptocurrency gifts, something that is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, very close to $1 million average there. And I can tell you from experience, having worked on nearly all of those, some of those cryptocurrency gifts were from the types of donors that we are talking about today, donors who were making significant 8-figure gifts based on an overall philanthropic disposition that was driven by their background in investing in that case in cryptocurrency. So seeing larger gifts facilitated by an upswing in asset value and practical tax planning reasons, but also a desire to put this appreciated asset to significant charitable purposes. And that's a common theme for all of our donors, but you do see it with these larger donors across asset types, and we'll talk about that today. None of the case studies are about cryptocurrency. They're pretty much all about business interests and real estate, and how those types of business activities, investment activities can lead to significant wealth that can also drive significant charitable giving. So a quick agenda. First, I wanted to start off by talking about what do these white whale donors look like? What are their common characteristics? Who really are they as kind of a class of donors? And sort of get a feel for who we're talking about here at a very general, high level. With that in mind, then we're going to talk through a few case studies. First, the largest charitable remainder trust, certainly that I've ever worked on. Then we have Paul talking about a really large gift annuity. And then Paul will talk about a really recent gift. This came in, I think, after we had already sent out the webinar blast. So we weren't able to include it in the webinar blast, but it was a perfect fit, really, because it was so recent, and it was just a good example of how these gifts can unfold. So Paul will talk about that, and then we'll wrap up talking about uh, tips for dealing with these types of gifts, these types of donors, and hopefully have some time for questions. So moved through everything pretty quickly there, but I think we have a lot of content today, so hoping to get through everything with time for questions at the end. So we'll just dive right in, I think. So when it comes to identifying these types of donors, perhaps it goes without saying that they are always ultra high net worth donors. So if we talk about ultra high net worth, what does that mean? Usually you're seeing a minimum of $30 million in assets as the cutoff there. And you'll see different numbers, sometimes maybe as low as 20 million or higher up like 50 million, but 30 seems to be the consensus for where that ultra high net worth starts. And that makes sense because as I was thinking about this, these normally have to be donors who have financial security, not just for themselves and their spouse, but for their entire family. Usually we're working, upwards and downwards across generations in terms of financial security. And at that point, that's when these donors will often start thinking about, okay, my family is secure. What can we do to secure the charitable causes that we support? That's usually a conversation that when we're brought into the discussion, you can tell that that conversation happened not too long ago between the donor and their family. So these are people who are no longer thinking about themselves. They are thinking about the greater good, however they might define that. Um, these are also donors who have very concentrated wealth positions. In case study number one, I think extremely concentrated. That they tend to have their wealth in one basket, uh, and that's usually from their career. Even if that is a career in investing, think real estate developers, or real estate investors who may have a large portfolio of real estate assets. That's still a fairly concentrated line item on their personal balance sheet. These aren't donors who have a ton of wealth via their retirement accounts. There are a lot, and increasingly so over the last decade, a lot of donors who are very wealthy via their retirement accounts. But this is not that type of donor here. Uh, and then as we talk about what their charitable goals are, and I said, however they might define that, they may not even have defined those goals yet. Usually when we're having this discussion, they know they want to do something charitable, but they may not have advanced past that actual thought of let's do something good with this money. They might have some specific goals. They may have an idea towards a foundation or an operating charity that they want to support or they want to create. That's fairly common, but not all the time. I think it can be fairly surprising to talk to these donors and maybe they want to support your program, but they don't know how. They know they want to support their college, but they don't know what particular program within the college, or what particular endowment they might want to create. Uh, there's charitable goals. They have an idea that this is the time to fund those charitable goals, to go on the path to achieving them, but perhaps that's as far as they've gotten. And then importantly, they have uh, yeah, they will put their advisors on the clock. And this is really important because these types of gifts need, as everyone knows, careful planning. Um, these gifts will not only have significant tax ramifications for the donor and perhaps for the charity or charitable vehicle that is being deployed to achieve those goals. So there's tax ramifications. There also needs to be careful legal planning, particularly if there are trusts involved, and there often are family trusts involved. Financial goals, because this planning may be occurring in conjunction with some other significant liquidity event. It's a high income year for the donor. That's why they want to make the gift this year. That's going to impact the financial projections. And sometimes they will even bring in their philanthropic advisors. I'm sure many of you know consultants who do that kind of work, or are in fact that kind of consultant yourself. So those types of advisors are almost always in the mix here, as is a family office. A year or two ago, I think, yeah, early 2025, I was thinking about the big gifts of this sort that we had seen through Decamai. And as I was going down the list of the very biggest ones, I was realizing, family office there, every single one of the top gifts that year had worked through a family office. You will see that more and more often with these ultra high net worth donors. Sometimes it's a multifamily office, but the wealthier they are, usually the more often you will see a dedicated family office which manages this type of planning, because the comprehensive service offering of a family office kind of combines all of those things I just mentioned: the accounting, the legal, the financial planning, the investment activities. All of that is kind of wrapped into a family office. So you'll see those a lot. And similarly, uh, they can often provide a level of insulation between the charity and the actual donor. There have been a number of these cases, large gifts, where I have never once interacted with the actual donor. Everything runs through the advisors, and that is part of the advisor's job, is to make sure the gift happens, to interpret and accomplish the donor's goals. And that can work really well, because those advisors are more responsive, easier to explain the technicalities to, because they're more focused on getting this gift done, whereas the donor probably has a lot of irons in the fire. And then finally, as I think about what these donors often look like, they are donors who are willing to find something that is a bespoke solution to their charitable problem, how to accomplish this charitable goal with a complex asset. And they will be willing to shop around to find someone who can help them get there. It is common for us to get calls about the same proposed gift, the same situation, from multiple advisors. It happened last week where I was talking to a donor's attorney about a very complicated situation. And then Brian let me know, oh, by the way, their tax advisor called me. I think it's probably the same one. And then I was talking to the attorney, and it turned out it was. Very, very common with these types of donors, where they know what they're trying to do, or have the sense that what they're trying to do is unique, and they understand that. They will look around until they find a group that can help them accomplish this unique goal. So with that in mind, I'll go to the first case study here, the Jumbo or Mega Charitable Remainder Trust. So here we had, and just to be clear, these case studies, these are all 2026 gifts. These are things that happened. These are not things we made up or are in the works. These are gifts that we worked on and completed this year. So first one, Mark here, single, age 57. He's an engineer by background, but Paul and Russ, I think it's fair to say I always thought of him as more of an inventor, because that's what he is, and that goes to the nature of the asset that was funding his charitable goals, but also I think to the way he was willing to engage with creative problem solving for his situation, which was very unique. I've never worked on a gift like this before. What Mark had invented was, basically a intellectual property. We'll say he had a company that held some valuable intellectual property. It was structured as an S corporation, which is important, and that will probably surprise no one. So he had he had built this product, and he had these charitable goals, and he sensed that there were multiple buyers out there who were going to offer staggering amounts of money. Uh, but that's really kind of as far as he had gotten when I think we first got brought into the conversation. I think, as I understand it, I wasn't involved in the very early stages. I think he really just walked into his bank and was talking to the bankers there, and they pretty quickly realized, to their credit, that he needed some special assistance for his situation, and they started making calls. Uh, and they got to Laura Malone on our team pretty quickly. I think I was a local bank in her area, so I think they may have personally known her and known to call her. Um, Unlike a lot of these types of donors, Mark's financial advisor was not in the driver's seat for this donation. It was really his estate planning slash tax attorney who did most of the work from Mark's standpoint as Mark's representative. Um, as I mentioned, the S corporation nature of this was really important because, and this was something that we realized and flagged pretty quickly. And I'm not sure anyone on Mark's team did realize this. Um, the assets that Mark held were inside an S corporation, fairly common practice. But if we're looking at something like a charitable remainder trust, that's a really big problem because that would have one would have blown the S election, and two would have generated a ton of UBTI inside the remainder trust, which is also a huge problem. That was something where we said, that's a non-starter as is. Mark can't give his S Corp stock to the charitable remainder trust. So we have to really think through the structure here. With any charitable remainder trust like this, no one here is going to be surprised to find out that we decided on a flip CRUT structure. That's very common for non-cash gifts going into a charitable remainder trust. A little bit unusual that this is not a lifetime remainder trust. This was only for a term of years. Not unheard of, not really a problem at all, just a little uncommon. Generally, the remainder trust, you think lifetime income. And as we thought through that structure, we kind of arrived at a three-way split. And this was driven in part by the fact that Mark needed some income up front. And he wanted some income via the trust for a term of years. But the value was far in excess of what his personal needs are. He's single, as mentioned on the prior slide. I don't think he has any kids. He doesn't have a ton of family that needs to be provided for. So what we figured out was first that he was going to retain a small portion of the company for himself. I think about 1% is what it was. And that was going to provide at closing enough income for the near term future. He was going to put a small amount, about 5%, outright into a donor advised fund. That was going to amp up the deduction a little bit and also provide a pot of money for immediate charitable giving. So seeing a few things in play here, kind of immediate charitable goals, long-term income needs, upfront income needs, and we were able to think through all of this, both with Mark himself. He was not one of these donors who you never talk to. He was very available, and also with Mark's attorney. And then finally, almost all of the value ended up going to a charitable remainder trust. I think about 94% went to the CRT. So the structure was something that we thought about pretty carefully, as you might guess from the fact that the S corporation was in play. It ended up being that the S corporation was the donor for, I think, most, if not all, of the DAF and remainder trust components, with Mark being the advisor on the DAF and the income beneficiary for the charitable remainder trust. So kind of carefully planning all of that through. And how did that planning take place? With these types of gifts, in my experience, you almost always end up with a situation where you're putting weekly calls on the calendar. And so that was usually 6 to 9 people, depending on how many advisors were able to join on the donor side and how many people on our team were able to join every week with side discussions, probably also weekly. He had an intellectual property attorney on every call. That attorney, I think, was primarily in listen mode to make sure that nothing was going to happen that might derail the value of the property or derail the negotiations with the potential buyers. The tax/trust attorney was on every call and was kind of in the driver's seat, as I mentioned. He was the one who was kind of guiding things along because Mark, as technical and really smart as he is, he understood this is not something that he was going to get all the ins and outs of this kinds of charitable planning. That's where his attorney did the heavy lifting and did a lot of work with our team. There was a financial advisor who was, as I mentioned, part of this discussion and got brought in more as we were finalizing things. And there was a thought to, get a trust protector on the remainder trust. That's something that I've not seen very often in the past. Paul, maybe you have, but I think prudent probably for charitable remainder trust of this magnitude. This was a remainder trust that would be potentially in the very high nine figures. And then on our team, we typically had 3 or 4 people on every single call, each with a different skill set. Paul and myself, also Russ Willis, and then Laura Malone, as I mentioned, who was kind of the one who brought this to our larger team and said, let's put together a team that can get this gift done for Mark. And it took a lot of planning, a lot of calls, but we were able to get the gift done about 2 months ago, I want to say. So the largest charitable remainder trust I've ever worked on, a very unique gift, unique asset, and a lot of charitable capacity for Mark. I think that goes a long way with these types of gifts when you see someone who says this is far in excess of what I need, and I am willing to devote almost all of it to charitable purposes. So that was a great gift. Let me pause there, see if I can pull up some questions before handing it over to you, Paul.
Brian, can I just add a couple
Oh
thoughts
yeah, of
to
course.
case?
Yeah. You worked on this as much or more than I did.
Well, I don't know about that. You were a great leader, keeping us organized. I just wanted to add that, really from our team side, not myself personally, but there were several team members that helped identify potential pitfalls that Mark's advisors had often proposed throughout the process. And because not that we're all geniuses, but these individuals may see this type of opportunity once in their career as well. And for many of these advisors, they may see 1 or 2 CRTs a year, and usually funded with Apple stock. So having that input from this collective group on our side was really instrumental. We started asking Mark about potential buyers, and we, with his advisors, started to hear numbers that were, really large. But one of the things that were obvious to us, if we were going to agree to be trustee, is that this was probably going to be an asset that was going to be sold on a long-term note. So we had done, and Russ in particular had put together a number of models to kind of simulate what the income would look like for Mark, and what that what the depiction of that would look like over that 15 years. And the term of years CRT, of course, the reason we did that, Ryan, as you pointed out, was that because the sub S was the donor, there is no life there to measure. So the longest term that we could go up to is a 20-year term for Mark. I think those were, and we also drafted the initial trust for his tax attorney to review. And then the tax attorney, of course, made, some edits to that. But it was us that really, kind of spurred a lot of these actions to move the gift forward.
And this next one, which I don't know as much about, but I will just say in terms of gift annuities, really significant size for a gift annuity. To it was one of those ones where as soon as it was brought up, everyone said, okay, we got to make sure that this isn't going to cause any problems with the overall pool that I talked about, 1,200 contracts and 100 million in value, and this is a significant percentage. So I'll let you talk about how this one got planned out.
Sure. Well, let me introduce you to Ray and Dina, not their real names, of course, but a charitable couple in their late 70s. And, I don't know that they always thought about themselves as philanthropists. They were, good, solid annual donors throughout their life. And they're just kind of at this transition point in their life where they are thinking about legacy and also tax efficient planning, everything that comes with that. So, what they had for this initial discussion was five adjacent investment properties in Northern California, a very well known city near a very well known private university. These are all income producing rentals. They live out of state in another Western state, but managing these properties from a distance in, of course, their late 70s. And these five are not even really the bulk of their holdings. They own more than 40 other rentals in their home state. The California properties were kind of outliers, but the natural first candidates to really talk about um, divesting of or shedding, for lack of a better term, is thinking about their longer term plans. Uh, their goal, in their words, were to simplify their life, convert out of state real estate into dependable lifetime income. Um, and that is the classic profile for a real estate funded gift annuity. I've been fortunate now the past 4 years at Charitable Solutions to do a lot of them, a number of them, and just not necessarily always at this scale that most organizations don't see, and and to work with a couple that with the capacity to do this. So with that, Ryan, maybe the next slide. So, how this gift found us is a little story in and of itself. This gift came through a small college in the Midwest that had never heard of us. They were referred by a major public university in the Midwest. And Ryan, they may have met, these two plan giving officers may have met at the plan giving roundtable in Denver, if I recall correctly. Um, but why the referral existed is that that this other major public university had worked with Ryan and I on a somewhat similar prospect, not necessarily to the mega wealth that this couple, that Ray and Dina have, but this other donor with 14 rental properties in the Denver area. And so that Denver donor has been chipping away at divesting of their own properties. And Ryan and I have worked on, up until this point, a couple of CGAs funded with real estate so far, and potentially looking at a charitable remainder trust down the road, charitable remainder unit trust, of course. Um, and so this larger gift arrived because of the hands-on work that we've had with this discussion with this other potential donor. So I guess the bottom line is there, you never know where your next mega gift will come from. And the work that you do well is really the marketing that you can't see. And you might say, well, your situation is different from my organization. It probably is, but you also have constituents. We don't. We live off of referrals. But the donor stories that you could tell after these mega gifts, hopefully the donor will, will support going through that process, the best marketing that you could possibly have. Next slide. So here is the structure: five CGAs, one per property. And that's really important when we work with donors who have multiple real estate positions and they're looking at donating one or more than one property. We usually limit, I think always limit each contract to one property. From an accounting perspective, it's much cleaner and it makes complete sense to do it that way. 9 million in total appraised value. This has just been completed within the past about month or so. I would love to tell you that these gifts are easy peasy. They are anything but. Just transferring the utilities alone is a heavy lift. And thank goodness that we have one person on our team that really specializes in that. The tenants typically pay utility bills, and at any given time when you have five rentals and there are different, so some of these properties were like duplexes, and even fourplexes. So any tenants moving out at different times across five properties, changes the dynamic of who manages what, who pays what utility bills. One tenant in the last 30 days sadly passed away during this short window that we've taken ownership. It's difficult, human scenarios, and we're fortunate to have a team that comes together. There's no property manager in place. So what happens when we take on gifts like this is that we are filling that role. And we do try to set a standard with the realtor, the broker that we work with, that yes, you are a listing agent, but we don't, call them a property manager, but we do try to leverage them because they live in the geographic area generally where they have the property listed. So the point that I want to make here is that our jobs are really fun, but they're not always as glamorous. I think what people think. I'm just not on the front end pitching gifts all the time. We're on the back end where these gifts are really won and lost. So in my former life as a lead gift planner at a major public university, 13 staff on our team with goals and metrics, no way could I have worked on a gift at this level of detail after the gift came in. And the stewardship, as you all know, is critical. You do not want the stewardship to go south. And it would be a moot point anyway, because I've worked for two major public universities over 15 years, and they just wouldn't have been able to accept a real estate funded CGA, really of any kind, but of any kind of this value, because even though these are two major robust plan giving programs, this would have been 50% of their pool. And of course, Brian Klontz, being the national expert in mitigation, can allow us, the flexibility and luxury to take on these types of gifts. And that's precisely, I think, why National Gift Annuity Foundation exists, so your organization can say yes to these types of gifts. And really, if you serve as trustee of the CRT, don't try to talk the donor into a flip CRUT when that's not what they want. Some of these donors really want an annuity, and the difference in these vehicles. They're very different vehicles. And a flip CRUT isn't for anyone. So don't push your donors into those if it's not the right thing to do, when we can help you, still get the great gift and then ultimately do what's right for your donor. So, Ryan, do you have any other thoughts on this one that I may have missed?
I didn't even realize until just now that this was related to by source the Denver area local kind of similar donor. So I
Yes.
think that's maybe actually instructive of how once you've worked on one gift of this type with one donor of this type, it can kind of snowball a little bit. Um, Practice makes perfect, but it also allows for more opportunities, I think. And understanding the ins and outs of these types of gifts allows you to uh, sense when there is another opportunity and kind of flesh out those opportunities. Of course, they don't always work out, but this is an example of one. I think that were it not for that Denver area donor, probably we would not have worked on this one, which is even larger. So that's news to me, and I should
Mhm.
have realized, I suppose. But yeah, uh, that's I think a good takeaway is that these don't have to be one-off gifts, even if it might be one gift by one donor. Often you can leverage that to see similarly situated donors in the future.
Absolutely. Okay, I guess we're at case study three now. A very different donor. Meet Tony. He's 65. He's a business lawyer from Texas, and I met him literally about 2.5 weeks ago. That's why this was a late addition to the deck in our presentation here. But Tony's a super nice guy. if I had to guess, he is either second generation Mexican American or first generation, and really excited about philanthropy. It wasn't like a culture in his family, but he's really excited about the impact that he can make for his law school. Particularly a professor there that he can still remember by name, which always amazes me because I can't remember hardly any of my professors by name. But he has a net worth of over 20 million. As I said, he was a business lawyer most of his adult life, but he built it by strategic real estate investing. And it wasn't rental properties like Ray and Dina, but this was like buying tracts of land in a major metropolitan city in Texas that just grows like a weed, as you know. And, eventually you hold on to this land. I think he bought this particular tract in like 2008, of course. And you'll see in a second, his cost basis is 200,000 on the property. But that's the type of person, when no one else wants these assets, when people are, when these assets are depressed, these are ultra high net worth people. They run into the building when it's on fire and they come out with these assets. So, as I said, not a lot of charitable giving history, but what changed is he really wanted to make an impact at his law school. And he kind of in his mind had a $1 million gift in mind. And as you can see, we were actually able to get that dollar amount to be higher. Ultimately, it'll probably end up being around 1.5 million instead of 1 million. But that is really a common pattern with these wealth creators. The philanthropic impulse really arrives kind of later, attached to a specific institution, of course. And when it arrives, sometimes it arrives super fast. Okay, next slide, Ryan. Okay, so I want to give credit where it's due to the university's gift planner. He's extremely sharp. I've known him for a while, and we've had donor conversations before, but we've never had one that closed. But he really understood how an undivided gift of real estate could work. He heard me give a presentation when I was in town, speaking about another case study of a gift of undivided interest in real property. And he also knew, I would give him even more credit for this. He knew that the university and even the outside counsel at the university would simply not be able to act swiftly enough. And I give him just as much credit for kind of checking that university ego at the door and saying, look, we need to, find another partner that has the expertise in this area, but also can move quickly. It's not just about the fact that, we have experiencing these types of gifts. It's just being able to move, because the fact pattern is that the property was well, we didn't know what it was valued at, but he was getting whispers of offers at 4.2 million. Okay, and remember I mentioned earlier that the cost basis is 200,000, so nearly all gain. And this kind of prompted the idea that Tony, after the sale, would give $1 million to the law school, right? And so the gift planner said, well, Tony, if you give this, before the sale, it's usually more tax efficient. More on that in a couple of minutes. But the solution was to deed an undivided fractional interest to charity before certainly any binding contract exists. And there had already been, a discussion with this potential sale. Nothing was practically certain, no binding obligation, but close enough to a possible prearranged sale that we had to move carefully and get everything documented. So the sale was, so I would say this was about 2 weeks ago. Had a meeting with Tony, and we said, look, he said, well, if there's a purchase and sale agreement that comes in, would you be able to sign it, later this week? And I said, Tony, we have to have a deed that you have conveyed, an undivided interest to Decami Asset Trust, our National Donor Advice Fund, before I could sign anything. And you would want that to happen because you do not want to be questioned later about a prearranged sale. So we had to move within like a day or two on all of our paperwork, which again, I'll talk about here shortly. But then most importantly, getting that deed, and even though he was remarried, because Texas is a community property state, he had his second wife sign the deed as well. He's an attorney himself, and he felt like that was the safest thing to do. Now, the image that you see on the right-hand side here, I've always wanted to create tools inside the Gift Planners workstation that hasn't existed before, but something that I knew I would use on a regular basis, not only myself, but plan giving professionals, financial advisors, real software, and a real research platform, not just for calculating, like charitable gift annuities, but all kinds of unique gifts like this. Because Tony, at the end of the day, he was intrigued with what the gift planner said. The gift planner said, if you give an undivided interest first, that would most likely be more tax efficient than giving cash. But he can't visually see anything, right? So what you see here is the input that I put into the part gift, part sale calculator that we're going to have in the gift planner's workstation by after Labor Day. That's my goal. We're working on these as we speak right now. And then on the next slide, Ryan, if you move down. So this is just part of the output here. Basically, Tony wanted to start with a $1 million gift. When we ran the numbers in the calculator and put the results in front of him, the deduction on the gifted portion, he kind of kept saying, well, can we optimize this? And so we kind of figured that about 32% undivided interest would get to a point where the benefit of avoiding the gain on the part that he donated and the deduction that he would earn from that would be pretty much enough to offset the gain on the part that he kept. Remember that having that significant of a gain raises the donor's AGI significantly in the year of the sale. And so that 30% of AGI limitation goes up considerably in that year of the gift and the sale. And so a lot of the software programs, even if you would have something like that, wouldn't be able to take those things into consideration. And then the 5-year carry forward, each of those years that he can carry that deduction forward, by the end of that 6th year, that would basically optimize the tax result of the gift here. So I won't go over all the numbers in the spirit of time, but you can see here that if he just in scenario A sold the asset himself, what the capital gains and ultimately what he's going to walk away with. And remember that Texas, there's no state income tax in Texas. So, we typically don't have that working for us, like in California, for instance. I mean, the results would look incredible for a California donor. But you can see over on the right-hand side that, yes, by donating 32%, of course, he's going to pocket less. But look at the impact that he was able to make to the college, to the university, of 1.3 million. And by the time this was the initial illustration I ran for Tony, by the end of it, we got to the point where the gift should net 1.5 million. By the end of that week, so within, I would say, 72 hours, we were signing a purchase and sale agreement. So fingers crossed on it, that we close on it and that he's able to make this impact very quickly to the law school. I know that he's extremely excited about it. I think that's the end of that case study, Ryan, if I'm not. Oh, one more point here is that this is yet another module in the Gift Planners workstation, is that when you work on a gift of undivided interest, which I think is one of the top 5 tax smart charitable gifts in America right now under the current tax regime that we have and the demographics and everything that we have, that you also need a tenants in common agreement. Okay, you can't accept an undivided interest in real estate without a TIC agreement, because you got to know which of now you're a co-owner with the donor, right? So you have to know who's going to be responsible for what. And what Tony agreed to was that he would just cover any costs incurred with the property while we hold it together. It's zoned for agriculture, so this is like one of the best gifts, at least for me, to deal with because there's nothing to do. But of course, we would do this with rental properties as well. But it's usually best that the donor pay, the expenses. Uh, it makes our job easier, and then we settle up then at closing, and then they get reimbursed what they're owed. Okay, I think I'm done with that one, Ryan. But I just wanted to point out why this gift really happened. It was because the gift planner saw an opportunity, but I had this new tool that I was excited to use where I could visually give the donor somewhat of an idea of what the tax savings could be.
And Paul, there was a question actually about how someone might get access to the gift planner's workstation. So this is probably the time to address that.
Sure. Yes, of course, the idea of sharing these tools with you is to get people excited about them. Estategiftplanning.com is Plan Giving Interactive, which is a kind of a partner company to Charitable Solutions. Brian's an advisor. Ryan has helped considerably as we develop these new modules. But a full disclaimer, the gift planners workstation 1.5, which these tools are going to be a part of, are not going to be ready till after Labor Day. But that doesn't mean that you won't get considerable value from the workstation today. There are great tools in there. Frank is our AI research tool. And if you go to our website, you can see how Frank was trained and what makes Frank different from other AI tools out there. So estategiftplanning.com.
Great. So a couple slides left, and then hopefully a minute or two for questions. I think we wanted to talk about kind of tips for working with these donors on these donations. I think any charity, any gift planner, development officer who is looking at a gift like this has to accept that this is going to be a big demand on staff time. It is for us. It will be for anyone who looks at these more complex, jumbo-sized gifts. I mentioned this. These weekly calls almost always happen. Even the ones that I'm not involved in, I can usually guess when they're going to end up with that weekly call cadence. Um, and that's going to be something that are kind of the team weekly calls. That's not going to count your internal weekly calls. So you're probably looking at multiple weekly calls with probably more staff than you would ever anticipate, including people in your finance department. So that's something that I think you really need to manage your expectations for kind of the overall team workload with a gift like this. I think it is also reasonable to expect that you are going to need to bring in your outside legal and accounting advisors, even on the charity side of things. Of course, the donor will need to do that for themselves, but you as the charity, particularly if we are talking about things like trusteeing remainder trusts, which require their own tax returns every year, as everyone knows, or gift annuities that might require particular reporting. That's going to require your accountants being looped in. And as you are thinking about these legal agreements, that's where you may say, this is really where we need our dedicated outside counsel to take a look at some or all of this. The family offices, I say that they're a double-edged sword in my experience. They are single-minded in their service to their client, that being the donor. So they will be very proactive, let's say, in their follow-ups, and that can be good because that means that your gift planning team can get things done that you might not have been able to do without the assistance of the family office. But they are also they have one client, and you, as a representative of the charity, your client, I suppose, is your charity, but you have many, many donors, and we have many donors, and the family offices do not always realize that. So that they can be challenging to deal with sometimes when they're making demands of you that are not realistic given other donations that might be in the works. These donors, they are big picture thinkers. They may have some appetite for complexity, but they will not have a background in planned giving. Uh, Pretty often, they don't have any nonprofit background at all. So they don't appreciate the finer details of gift planning, and they may not, yeah, they may not really know anything about the 501c3 space. It is very common to have early discussions with these donors and realize that they need some education on the differences between family foundations and public charities and what that means in terms of how donor advised funds might work with one or both or not work, how a charitable remainder trust might be able to work with one or the other or not work. They require a lot of education when it comes to these finer details sometimes, and a lot of times they don't even have time for the education. So that's where you have to again rely on the donors advisors to kind of do the necessary communication. One thing I've noticed is that when these donors are putting their attorneys on the clock, especially if it's a lot of attorneys, and particularly if it's a lot of attorneys on a long Zoom call, that means they're really serious about the gift. If they're not willing to do that, that means they're not really all that serious. And they might get there one day, but if you're not seeing significant hourly advisors being involved on the donor's side, that suggests that they're not willing to, put their own money in play to get the gift done. So I think that's something to be sensitive to. On the other side of this, if the donor has clearly demonstrated charitable intent, that's a really good sign. We don't have much time. We worked on one that was high risk in a lot of ways, heavily leveraged real estate. Loan was coming due soon. Uh, those are not great facts, but the donor had publicly made statements about desire to support the charity that referred the gift over to us. That really gave us a lot of comfort that the donor was serious because this was the gift clearly that was going to achieve those charitable goals that the donor was on the record about wanting to achieve. That can go a long way, at least in my view, when you know the donor is really serious about the gift. And these gifts, frankly, can take a long time to materialize. Paul's third case study, I think, is the exception, not the rule. They don't
Outlier.
usually move that fast. And it can take a long time to get from the planning stage to a completed gift, and then from a completed gift to charitable dollars. And I think it's important to do that expectation setting with all of the stakeholders involved. So I think we've got maybe a minute for questions here. I think we did a decent job of answering everything that came in through the chat. There was one question about vested stock options that Brian answered, and those can be difficult. I would say vested and exercised stock options can work for these types of gifts. That type of donor, which we're seeing a lot of lately, and particularly this year with these kind of mega IPOs, that type of donor does have the capacity to make this type of gift. There would be a whole other hour if we talked about the ins and outs of vested stock options, particularly in advance of an IPO. Those are not anywhere near as simple as you might think when we're talking about public stock. It's public stock, but it's locked up for 6 months, 12 months. There might be liquidity issues, transfer restrictions. There's a lot to deal with there when we're talking about vested and exercised stock options, particularly ones that are pre-IPO. And then maybe time for one training to understand the variety of planned giving options here. let's see what's the best quick answer there, Paul, for the
Our
best places
webinars.
someone could go. Our webinars,
Next slide.
yeah, our webinars, and then I was going to say Frank and Max also.
Yeah.
So all our webinars available via our website, and if you go into YouTube and just search for Charitable Solutions, you should find our channel, which has a number of webinars. A number, I mean, 60 plus at this point. So we've been doing this for about 6 years now. I think next month might be the 6-year anniversary. So that's all we've got for today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we will send out recording to everyone who signed up with all the questions from today and from Thursday's session. And really appreciate everyone's time today. And thank you, Paul, for presenting with me.
Thanks, everyone.